Jeff. For those who preemptively sat close, we appreciate it. All right, so I'm going to start us off in prayer, and then introduce our speaker for the night. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today and just for this gathering of believers. God, I thank you for this book that we're going through and just the discussion that we've been having each week. Father, I pray that you would bless our time together, that we would grow in our understanding of you and our role as a church, and as individuals in this community and with the people that we impact every week. Father, I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so tonight our speaker is going to be Matt Grimes. He's going to intro us and get us started. Hello.
It's a huge group. Everybody calm down. Now, you know, the first thing I have to share for those who I haven't shared this with, this is my book. And you think, like, what's wrong with this guy? Why is it upside down? It's not. See, the inside's right side up. Mandy and Dave thought it would be hilarious to make sure that I got this book. So the way I'm going to get them back is by I'm just kidding. But it is kind of fun to mess with people before they know the book, because then you can just put it up in front of your face like this, and they come down and be like, with your eyes crossed, and just know exactly what's going on. It's good times. Okay, so here's what's exciting about this chapter. It's very short. If you haven't read it, I will try to stall for the next 7 to 8 minutes while you get through it. But it is short. It is. And I noticed something right off the bat, which I think you all probably did too, that it is for church leadership. And so I said, well, I don't have any kind of official title, but since I'm supposed to be the church, I'm just going to read this and pretend that I am church leadership, right? Because we're all church leadership. Yeah? In some way, shape, or form. Yeah. So that's how I read it. Hopefully that's how you read it or are reading it, but I won't tell. So the first thing that pops, and it was divided up very nicely too, you know, into sections. That's the reason I picked the chapter. When it was like, hey, pick one and do it, I was like, it's divided. And since I'm not a planner, I can just go, gifting. I'll just write what that is and talk about it. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so the first thing that I noticed with the chapter is it right off the bat talked about missionality as a continuum of degrees. So it's not like, and really the whole theme throughout is there's not one way to do it. You know, there's not one right way to be gathered and scattered. And it also talked about how it can seem vague when you're looking at it as, and I wasn't here last week, but it was interesting to read the modalic and sodalic and all that, and I'm certain that people pronounce it different ways. I just went with modalic and sodalic. I tried to get real country with it, but that didn't work. And then I tried to sound proper, but it all sounded the same every single time. So hopefully, if somebody corrected everyone and said how to pronounce it, I'm doing it right. If I'm not, shh. So anyway, I thought it was, it's kind of vague. There's a big challenge here, which is you think about what you're doing and how does it fit into this model of being gathered and or being scattered. It's also how can we be church leadership and support church leadership in decision making. So right now, talking a lot about where will we meet or where are we in that direction, whether it's tomorrow or in 10 years, what will we be doing, and we're in the middle of that decision making. So how do we have those conversations and support each other in doing that? To dive right into the 4 sections, the first one talked about gifting, which I think is kind of neat stuff. And I know Sarah and I have had conversations about people's strengths. It's something that we both teach in the same program, and Sarah actually works in that program now directly. It's about leadership, and so one of the things that we end up talking about with our students is the various strengths that they have, is their inherent talents and how do they use them. And so it really, when I was reading this section, it made me think of that. So what kinds of spiritual gifts do people have, and what kinds of other gifts that maybe aren't labeled spiritual gifts do people have? And since this was talking about church leadership, it might be talking about a pastor that leans more modalic or sodalic, whether they really are strong in one area or really want to be strong in one area. This section was kind of talking about, consider the mission and the vision of the church and what the people bring to the table. And so it's really what gifts are there, not what you want to be. In the second section, where it's talking about calling, how many people in what they do right now, whether they're a student, they're at work, how many people feel like they are in some way living their calling in some way, shape, or form? So a few people too. And I'm leaning that way. I've been teaching more, and it turns out that's what I've been supposed to be doing this whole time. So I'm figuring that out. That's kind of what I was thinking about. Like, what is my calling? I think my calling is to teach. And so if you're a church leader, a member of a church, what is God calling you to do, calling your church to do? Is God calling your church to be more sodalic, be more modalic? It's kind of that conflict that I know I have all the time, the human versus the spiritual. Is it this is what I want to do, or is it what God's calling me to do? And it's in some ways this section is talking about it's not a competition which one is better, to be more modalic or sodalic. It's a balance. One's not better than the other. Maybe your church needs to lean more one way because that makes sense. But what is God calling the church to be? And then it talks about it later too, about forcing. You don't want to force the church one direction or the other. You start to force yourself to do more outreach and less internal focus, but maybe that's not what your church needs right now. The next section where it talks about capacity, that's one that I've had at work. I've had a lot of conversations talking about capacity, particularly intellectual capacity, and in this case, it listed out, financial resources, people resources, and physical resources. It's talking about what's tangible, what do you actually have. So you can look at the gifting and the calling and see what's out there. But, for us at Northstar, I'm thinking from a financial standpoint, 2011 budget and what's coming in versus 2012. And when you look at those sheets next to each other, we've been very blessed this year. And that's cool. When you think about capacity, from a financial standpoint, what's our capacity? Well, this year we've been growing in that area. In terms of people, in terms of numbers, we're clearly growing. And as the numbers grow, I watch different folks in the church. If you think about Jeff specifically, you see him walk up to different people every single week and have these long conversations on Sunday mornings. And I've been a part of those conversations. And next thing I know, I'm a part of 3 committees and 2, or whatever. And it's a good thing. I think it's discovering as we're growing with people what are the talents to bring to the table. So that's another resource we have. And then from a physical standpoint, we are currently meeting in places that aren't Northstar Church, the building. It's Northstar, the church, the people that are the church. So maybe that's our way. Maybe it's not. Maybe we decide we do need a building. I don't know. And I think that's just something else to consider. What is our capacity in terms of physical? Is it better that we're in buildings where we can go, we can do small groups at VCM, or we can have church in the middle school or whatever, or high school? And then the first 3 sections, the gifting, the calling, and then the capacity, it's all a lot of proactive. It's a lot of evaluate what you have and what you can do up front. And then when it gets down to the variables, a lot of that is reactive stuff. It's things that are going to happen that you just don't know they're going to happen. It can't be controlled. Certainly some variables can be controlled, but in this section, it was really talking about how does church leadership, how does a church manage the different things that happen. So many things can come up, and you can roll with it, or you can freak out about it, or you can ignore it. And it's encouraging us, how do you roll with it? How does leadership roll with it? And it was kind of neat when I talked about the Newton example. I just skipped over the sections where there were like F equals M, blah, 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 blah. Skip that stuff. And here's what I'm saying by that. So, I didn't actually skip it, but so one thing I was talking about is the church isn't going to move in any one direction unless there's some kind of catalyst for it, unless there's something that's pushing it in a direction. Here, talking about our leadership, after we're evaluating the gifts, trying to discover what is God's calling for us, taking inventory of what resources we have, what direction should we be going? It's not just going to happen. We have to push it in a direction. We have to think about what direction. Can't force it. but where should we be going? The second part of this was talking about how, yeah, there may be different denominations, but if that goal and the practice is the same Christian end goal, then why not collaborate? My opinion, we do a pretty good job of collaborating. It's not just one small group of Northstar Church. Northstar Church is a lot of different interactions and collaborations, and I think that's fantastic. And that's really what the authors were mentioning. You know, you really have to look at what other churches are doing in the area, what other groups. I mean, we're on a campus. You know, the house is right at a campus, so you've got various groups on campus. You have other schools in the area. I mean, why not collaborate in order to really serve God in the way that He wants us to serve Him? The last thing is there's going to be pushback no matter what you do. And it was not the longest portion of the chapter. I mean, it was a short chapter, but it wasn't the longest portion. But I thought it was, to me, one of the most important parts, which is, I think we've got the calling. I think we know what our resources are. I think we know what direction to go. And as soon as you start going that direction, somebody's going to push back. It might be an external pushback. It might be internal, but there's going to be a pushback of some sort. And it's all about have faith, work together, support each other, move the direction you need to go. As promised, there was my short summary. Ta-da.